Now, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to this episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Joining me on the phone from the band Tesla, it is bassist Brian Wheat. He has a new book out called Son of a Milkman, My Crazy Life with Tesla. And let me bring in somebody who knew Tesla, I guess, way back when, right? It is the one and only Alan Niven. Bonjour. Oh, sorry, Sir Alan Niven. Pardon. I ask for pardon. How are you?
Pardon granted. I am very well. How are you today?
Good. So you knew the Tesla boys back in the day when they were City Kid, and you've always felt that they've got something. These boys are good, right?
Well, the story sometimes gets clearly repeated, but in point of fact, Bruce Lundvall, when he was starting up EMI New York, EMI Manhattan, had offered me an A&R job, which I decided I didn't want to take at that time. But Bruce called me up and asked me if I'd do him a favor and go and check out a band playing at the country club in Reseda in California and report back to him because he'd been asked to look at this band. And I told Bruce, I don't even have to go. I can tell you about this band right here and now. And he said, well, no, I promised that I'd send somebody along to take a look. So if you don't mind, go and have a look for me. So I went and looked, and the band was as it was. And I was very unenthused about the idea of recommending them to Bruce. But the opening band was really interesting because they had a singer who had one of those voices that the minute you heard it, you went, oh, hello, give him the phone book. He's going to be convincing. And they were a band called City Kid. So I went back to Bruce and told him that the band he wanted me to look at was a pass. And I suggested that he take a really good look at the opening band. And he said, no. He said, I just wanted to check on that one. I'm not interested in the opening band, which I thought, well, ask my opinion on one, but don't care for my opinion on the other. So I said to Bruce, listen, if you don't mind, I'm going to pass their name on to someone else. And I did more than that. I put them on a bill opening for Great White when Great White were going through Sacramento. And at that time, the band gave Jack a tape to bring back to LA for me. And I sent Don Dawkin and Jack up to Zootout's office at Geffen with the tape with the suggestion that he take a really good look at them. And the next thing I know is they're signed to Geffen and Cliff and Peter were managing them. So
yeah, and Cliff and Peter gave them their name. They came to them and said, "You're going to be Tesla." Yeah, and
yes, that was Cliff's idea.
And the band at the time were a little bit like, in fact, one of the chapters in the book is called "What the Fuck's a Tesla." that's one of the chapters in the book. He's like, "What the fuck's a Tesla?"
Yeah,
and I'll ask you this. Also, in the book, in his Son of a Milkman book, there seems to be a little bit of anger towards Tom Zutaut. Now, that's my interpretation. Brian can tell you whether he's angry or not, but it seemed as though, because he writes in the book, everything was blah, 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 Tom Zutaut, and then Appetite for Destruction hit, and boom, he was gone, never saw him again. And I got a sense of, for me, as I read it, that he was frustrated and kind of angry, like, "Hey, where the is our guy? What's the story? Did Tom just sort of abandon them?"
Well, I can't speak for that because I'm not a member of Tesla and I wasn't their management. But I'm sure Cliff and Peter got what needed to be done. And I just want to remind you of something. Tommy Zutaut was a young lad back in that time. He was not a fully developed, mature individual. And for him to be susceptible to what might be termed great success, is not incomprehensible. And I think if you sat young Tommy Zutaut or old Tommy Zutaut down now, he would say, I was very young and at times I was out of my depth. And it wouldn't surprise me if there was a period of time when he was very pleased to be the young genius Tom Zutaut who had signed Motley Crue and Don Dawkins and Tesla and Guns N' Roses. Of course, I smile because, how did he get Motley Crue? Who introduced him to Don Dawkins? And got him the tape for Tesla. But,
So what you're saying is that you created Tom Zutaut.
No, I didn't create Tom Zutaut. If I had, I wouldn't have created such a Frankenstein. No, just joking there. No, Tommy and I were friends. And famously, when we first met, I invited him for dinner, and I cooked him chicken a la LSD, and he came on the Friday night for dinner and managed to get back to Hollywood by midday Monday. And in that period of time, I wanted to find out who he was and if it was someone I could connect with. And we made plans together. We were going to eventually run a label together was the plan.
Well, good plan. Now, we are recording this part of the show on December 11th. And 31 years ago, December 11th, 1989, you were over at Wembley Arena with Great White opening for Alice Cooper, also on the bill Brittany Fox, which is interesting because we're going to have our next episode with Doro and her drummer. Johnny used to be in Brittany Fox, or still is whenever they tour. But that show became the Great White album Live in London, which I think is still only been released in Japan. Great sounding album. The band sounds awesome. Just what do you remember from that night? And I know by the time folks hear this, we'll be past December 11th. But what do you remember from 31 years ago at Wembley Arena?
Well, what I remember clearly is that the BBC were going to record the headliner. And the BBC would use that for broadcast, but also they had their own label. And they had a stipulation that if you wanted the BBC, the Great British Broadcasting Corporation, to record your band, then we are going to put the recording out on our label no matter what. And of course, labels would genuflect and bend the knee because they wanted their bands to be played by the BBC, which was the main radio outlet for the nation. And the interesting thing was somebody came to find me backstage and said, would you talk to the BBC? And I said, sure, what's going on? And it turned out that Alice had got cold feet and was going to pull out of letting them record that night. And the BBC trucks were there. They were all mic'd up on stage. They had done sound checks. They were ready to roll. So since they were in situ, they came to me and said, well, can we record you guys? And I said, I'd be delighted. That would be wonderful for you to record us. I have one stipulation. I own the masters. They go back to Capitol. They don't go out on the BBC label. And there was some huffing and puffing, and we don't do this to the BBC. And apparently they went and made a phone call, and they came back and they said, fine, you can own the masters. We can use the recordings for live broadcast. And I said, that's perfect. I'm up for that. And the entertaining thing was I never said a word to the band because I had that moment of, do I tell them or don't I tell them? And I went, you know what? Don't let them know. So there's no red light fever. There's no consciousness of being recorded. There's no tightening of the muscles when you go on stage going, oh, fuck, we got to win this audience over in London, and we're being recorded at the same time. So I didn't tell them. And they played a great set that night. It's got a great energy. The recording is great. And it's a terrific live record.
And I'll just, before we move on to Brian Wheat, did that ever go out over the BBC, or did it really just become this CD that was released in Japan?
No, the BBC used it for broadcast. And I used the masters for a Japan release because when you were spending all summer in America and the winter and in the UK and squeezing in Japan when you could, by the time you got to Japan, you were late in the record cycle, the album cycle. So I always looked to have something to reignite a little bit of interest in the band with a different release. So there are a lot of little live discs and EPs about that were just for fun.
Yeah, you had the blues EP, and then the last question is, who handled the mix on that? Was that something that the band and you and management did, or whatever, the Capitol, or did the BBC basically just hand you a finished product with their guy?
I cannot remember if Mike and I mixed that or not. I think we might have, but it's also possible that we would just give them the 2-track. That could be the case too. I would have to go back and ask Michael to remember. It's been a while.
Yeah, and just before I get over to Brian Wheat, there is a new UFO Strangers in the Night 8-CD deluxe edition of box set of the Strangers in the Night. It has got every show from that week. So you've got Chicago on October 13th, 1978. You've got Wisconsin on the 14th, Youngstown on the 15th, Cleveland, Columbus, Kentucky. And I just got to say, it's if I'm not mistaken, it's Ron Nevison who got his hands on these tapes to remaster and remix. It is absolutely fabulous because it's a slice of life experience. You get a week of a touring band on the road, and you can see them, adding songs and cutting songs as the week goes by because they're probably getting tired or the voice or the whatever. And you hear the guitar playing where Rock Bottom, you've got basically 8 different versions of Rock Bottom because the guitar solo is, I guess Schenker just improvises. It's there's a musical motif, but the little bits here and there are different. Anyway, it's just fascinating because you hear these shows back to back to back to back, and there's an excitement, but there's also an exhaustion, and it's just fun to see. Wow, what must it have been like to be a band or UFO on the road for a week, 6 shows out of 7 nights. It's just a fascinating box set. I love it, and sonically it's superb. So I think the kudos go to Ron Nevison. Let me look at it here. I don't see a. I think we have to tip a hat to Ron, but if it's not Ron, whoever did it. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And on that, folks, here is the one, the only, Brian Wheat. We are speaking with Tesla bassman Brian Wheat. The new book is Son of a Milkman, My Crazy Life with Tesla. And as we say here in Montreal, le bonjour, Brian. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, man?
Good. So you've got this book out, and I gotta tell you, it's a fascinating read because there's a lot of stuff in there that, as a fan, I didn't know. But there's also there was the tone of the book that sort of shocked me a little bit. So I want to get into that. In fact, okay. First, I want to ask you, what compelled you to write the book the way you wrote it? Because you're talking about your mom getting the shit kicked out of her, get kicked out of her, which is one of the words that was in there. It was down and dirty. I mean, in terms of the language, in terms of the tone, it's like I'm bearing my soul. Why did you choose to bare your soul so much?
Well, why not?
Okay.
if you're gonna do it, if you're gonna put out a book, right, and you're gonna tell your story, well, tell the story. Whether it's pleasant or not. Be honest. That's, I think, my whole thing was be honest about what, where you came from, who you are, and where you are today.
Well, true. But I mean, I have to say, as a fan, I was a little shocked at some of the content. I was like, oh my God. So talk to me about that then, because I did sense reading the book that there was a lot of anger going on through it. Is that something that has been part of your life or has invaded your life where there's been this sort of unresolved anger? Have you been able to resolve it?
Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, I'm not going to go out and freak out tomorrow or anything. It's funny you say anger because I didn't really view it as anger. I was just viewed it as telling the story the way it went down. You know what I mean? But maybe it's anger. Maybe it was anger issues, and maybe those are the things that led to the anxiety and depression issues that I I've suffered with my whole life.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's probably something for a psychoanalyst to discover. But I'm sure that I talk about Dr. Hirschkopf in the book, and when I was in therapy with him, so maybe he thought they were anger issues as well. But I just it was getting to a point where I turned 58 this year.
Right.
And if I was going to do a memoir, it was like now seemed the time to do it, in terms of, where we are in our career and, where I am as a human being and everything. So, I started about 5 years ago, and I just started, telling the story kind of in a chronological order, and I do bear it all. I mean, I'm not, from the title, I was the milkman's son. I'm the illegitimate son of the milkman, So that was a joke, and I wear it as a badge of honor. Some people it would fuck with, and deep down probably did fuck with me. When I was younger, everything fucks with you when you're younger. You don't realize it, but it does. So I was just kind of letting it go, like throwing it out into the wind and let it be, here it is. This is what happened, and I'm okay. That's the main thing, is that through it all, it's like, look, I'm okay. I survived, I persevered, I'm okay. The band's okay. Everyone's okay.
Yeah, you did persevere, but I did get a sense, and especially in the opening chapters, that being the son of a milkman was a bit of a frustration and a almost like a black sheep kind of thing. Like, I'm a little bit different than everybody else, because you talk about not talking to your right.
Yeah, I guess I am, but I'm not, because Frank Hannon comes from the same background, except his dad wasn't the milkman. And I think that's why me and him, related and still do to so many ways. We kind of come up from, this kind of similar background. But yeah, it was kind of, look, I say in the book in 1962, it wasn't very cool to have an illegitimate kid. Society looked down upon it. And if anything I'm angry about is the way that my mom got treated for having me. That probably is, there's the anger issue is I didn't like the way that, her family or society looked down upon her, because it wasn't cool. Today it'd be no sweat, fuck, have 10 kids.
Today is the norm. So let me ask you just real quick about that, because you do talk about the family members, siblings, and you talk. Do any of them look at this book or look at it coming out saying, "Hey, tell your story, but why include us in this?" Or is there any grief on that sense, or did you consult with them and say, "Listen"?
Well, I'm sure I'll hear it from them, at some point and another. But if I don't put them in the story, then I'm not telling my story, because they're part of my story. Otherwise it's, what do I talk about? So yeah, I imagine, I would probably get some shit from them. To me, it was just, that's a funny question, but it's a good question, to be honest with you. I'm sure I'll get some shit from some people about it. And, hey, they can write their book and say what they want about me.
Yeah.
It's just how I recall my life. It's a story on my life and the things that affected my life.
Well, I got to tell you, that's what I like. It's the honesty, because even when you talk about Peter and Cliff, the management team, you're like, well, Cliff's not the kind of guy you can call up and tell him that your dog died. That's a direct quote from the book, which I thought was interesting, because, when
true.
Well, yeah, but management
He don't care. He wouldn't care. He would say, "Why, Brian? Why are you telling me this? What's this have to do with Tesla?" And that's the kind of guy Cliff was. That's okay. I love Cliff. I wouldn't. He was a genius. But what I was illustrating was that we had a yin and yang management. Peter Mitch, you call up and you tell your dog died, and he'd say, "Man, that's a real drag," and maybe you should get another dog to try to get over it, Brian. Because I had that kind of relationship with Peter Mitch, where Cliff Bernstein would be, just send me the songs that you're writing, and I wanted to show what I was dealing with. Where maybe people, I guess, what I would want people to take out of that is maybe where people think your manager is your best friend. They're not. They're your managers. They manage your business. And that not everything has a silver lining to it in life. You know what I mean? It's not all peace, love, and granola. You know, and so maybe that's what I was saying in regards to Cliff was, look, Cliff was a genius and Cliff was great, and Tesla couldn't have done what Tesla did without Cliff, but he wasn't the kind of guy you'd call for moral support, or you'd call if you had a personal issue. You would, he wasn't that guy. Where Peter was more that way, which is why in the book I think I kind of allude to that. I was closer to Peter than I was Cliff.
Which is fair. Now, that chapter that I pull that quote out is called "What the Fuck's a Tesla?" And when I went through the book, I saw that title and I went, okay, yeah, it struck me that the name of the band, Tesla, now everybody thinks of cars, and when you go on the internet to search up, you research the band, all you get is images.
But no one knew a fuck about Elon Musk back then.
No, but of course, right? Nobody knew that. So how did you the name?
Nobody knew who Nikola Tesla was.
Nobody.
Really.
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, we didn't. That's why I called it "What the Fuck's a Tesla." That's why when Cliff was saying, hey, we want you to call the band Tesla, we're like, what the fuck's Tesla? That was a direct quote. That's what we said. What the fuck's a Tesla? And he went, well, I'll tell you what a Tesla is. And Cliff educated us on what Tesla was. And we went, okay, we can relate to that. And that's how we got our name. We would have never picked that name in 1,000 years.
And that's what I was curious about, because you never would have picked it in 1,000 years. Was it hard to get behind it, even though he explained it? What was there? Is it a name that now you sort of believe in, or are you still at this point where you go, well, it's our brand, but what the fuck's a Tesla, and why have we been called this for 40? Like how?
Well, what's a Def Leppard?
Well, that's
you know
a good
what
point.
I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
We stood behind it because. Look, we didn't have a name. We were called City Kid at that point in time. And that didn't really go with our music, and Tesla became what it was. And, to this day, Troy's probably the one in the band that's got the most ties with the Tesla invention people and all that stuff. And, that's great. But we would have never called the band Tesla in 1,000 years. There's no way. We would have never done it. It wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
We didn't know anything about them.
Yeah.
And it never came up. It just never came up.
It's interesting.
And
that
now it seems like second nature. Oh, Tesla. Yeah. Hey, Brian Wheat from Tesla. Yeah. Except now it's like Brian Wheat from Tesla. What's he work at the car company? You know what I mean? That's what it's
I know. Listen,
what am I, a sales representative?
I have interviewed the band for the last 20 years, and 20 years ago when you would search up Tesla, you'd see pictures of you and Jeff Keith and Troy. Now when you look it up, I have to separate all the car pictures and go, okay, can we just get back to the band? Thank you, Google. Would you mind? The book,
right? Because again, we're taking the back seat. That's kind of always been, I talk about that in the book, like. Even when we were at Geffen Records selling 1 million records at a whack, we were always taking the back seat, either to Aerosmith or Guns N' Roses or Whitesnake or the Nelsons or Nirvana. That's kind of the moral of the story is that, we're always clawing for a place, And maybe me as an individual, I'm always calling for a place, of acceptance or whatever it is. I don't know. Some psychoanalysts would have to figure it out. But,
all right.
all I could do is just tell my story and go, well, this is who I am, and this is what I feel kind of made me who I am today, and these are the things I had to endure, and I still endure, and hopefully if you have to endure this shit too, know that you can get through it all and reach out to somebody. And, if you're feeling down, reach out to a friend. Don't just, try to deal with it on your own.
Right. So let me get back to the tone of anger in there, because you just mentioned Guns N' Roses, and of course you talk about Tom Zutaut, and he left you once. You say it clearly in the book. Appetite for Destruction takes off, and so did Tom. And I read that, and I went, "Oh, that pissed him off," and I would have been pissed off as well.
Of course, it pissed us off. Of course, it pissed us off.
Yeah. So
but that's life.
So,
that's the life. Yeah, once Appetite came out, I mean, Tom was off in Guns N' Roses land. I mean, even to this day, he's got something out where he's doing something with Alice Cooper or something. Some, little I saw on the internet, and he lists himself as Tom Zutaut, the man that discovered Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue, and he never mentions Tesla to this day. So, it's just the way it is.
So let me just explore that then, because there has been this perception, and it comes in through the book, and you just said it now in the interview, that, we were always the bridesmaid in a sense, right? And yet you never, you did quit for 3 years, but you never quit. You kept going. You've gone on for 36, 37 years. What has kept you and the band moving forward? And yes, and I'll talk about that period in the 90s where you took a little break, but regardless of that little break, you've stuck it out, and even though we
thoroughly enjoyed playing together.
Okay.
And we have drive. Me and Frank Hannon are very driven individuals. And we have drive, and that's what keeps us going. And it's our job. How about that? How about it's our job? It's how we make our living as well. We're not independently wealthy guys. We're not rich rock stars. We earn our living by going out and touring and singing Signs and Love Song and Cowboy and Susie and all the other songs. So all those things come into play, and that's what keeps us going.
Well, you did mention that you invested in real estate, but I do want to ask you this. In terms of moving, well, in fact, you know what? No, I'm going to go somewhere different here. We are recording this on December 8th, 1986, or 2020.
That's right. It's 40 years ago today, John Lennon was killed.
It was, and I was in Mexico at the time, and I remember going down to the food place, because we were in a resort, and the Mexican guy go, "Oh, you're from North America. John Lennon died," and I was like, "What?" Where were you when that happened? By the way, do you remember?
I was watching Monday Night Football.
Wow.
Howard Cosell told me.
Yeah,
told everybody. I was watching Monday Night Football. I remember vividly. But yeah, here we are, 40 years later, and
I remember it vividly too.
Fucked up the Beatles.
Like I said, I was in Puerto Vallarta, but Mechanical Resonance came out on December 8th, 1986, 34 years ago.
No shit.
Yeah.
Well, see, there you go, man, Mitch. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's a life-changing moment, which of course you talk about in the book. How do you sort of look back on this 34 years later? Do you listen to that album and go, "Motherfucker, we hit it," or do you go, "Oof, we should have done this on changes. Ooh, we should have just put another guitar"? Like, do you have that creative kind of that angst where you just go, "Oh, it could have been so much better"?
The only thing I don't like about that record is the way it sounds. I think, me and Steve Thompson talked about it a couple of years ago, but it'd be great to remix that thing because it sounds so much like 1986, and there's all that reverb all over the drums and over Jeff's voice and stuff. But I think, as far as the songs and stuff, the songs were great. I prefer the sound of like Psychotic Supper. I think that is, a real, that and probably Into the Now are really two records that really show what the band really sounds like. I don't think Mechanical Resonance sounds the way we sound. I mean, when you hear it live, it sounds better live than it does on the record. So, but I mean, it's a great album. I love it.
It's a
Don't
great
get
album.
me wrong. And to be honest with you, I don't really listen to our songs that much.
Well, no artist does, because you're too close to it.
Them, while we're making them, while we're making the record, I listen to it, and then for a brief period after we make the record, after it comes back from mastering and stuff. But on the whole, I don't really listen to Tesla records unless I got to go back and learn a song or something. Oh, let's play this song. Wow, God, I haven't played that in 30 years. Okay, I'll go back and listen to it. Sometimes when I'm around people and they listen to it, I'll listen to it because they want to listen to it. But I don't listen to it too much. But Mechanical, especially, is the one record I wish I'd love to remix that. Hear it sound the way it could sound, today. Same song, same performances, everything, just treated differently.
Well, listen, next year is the 35th anniversary, so there is an open window for that while everybody's sitting at home with COVID to maybe just go, oh, fuck it, let's go.
Yeah.
let's just go remix this. And by the way, you mentioned Into the Now, and I have to tell you, that is maybe after Mechanical Resonance, my second favorite, or even my favorite, and one of the reasons was I had been sent an advance on that 9 months before it got released. I had gotten a CD 9 months in advance, and I had this feeling of, oh, I got something nobody else has, and I listened to it daily. Every day that I had it and it wasn't released, and it's just such a great record and such a great comeback. So let me get over to chapter 10 here. You talk about the return of Tesla, why the fuck not? And you're talking about how you're in Soul Motor, and Jeff is in Bar 7, which, by the way, great album that he put out. And at some point, you bump into each other and at a New Year's Eve party, and you're sort of feeling a bit lonely, or you're in your own little world, but it's not the Tesla world. What was that moment like? Is that the right sort of context? I mean, were you just sort of missing your buddies, and you just wanted to be?
I hadn't seen him much. After we broke up, and I was having a New Year's Eve party, and he showed up, and I hadn't seen him, and I had known that he had gone to jail, for whatever it was, I know he got busted for methamphetamine, and then he got put on probation, and somehow his probation got messed up. I'll let him tell you that one day if he cares to share it, And he wound up having to go to jail. So I was feeling really bad for him because, he's one of my favorite guys on the planet. I've seen him. So when he did show up that night, he looked great. He looked healthy. He just looked good. Because there were a few times I saw him in between that breakup where he didn't look so good. Of course, I probably didn't look so good either because I was doing a lot of blow at the time. You know what I mean? So I think, we were both feeling better and, whatever. And I saw him. It was just great to see him. And I hadn't seen him in a while. And then after that, we started seeing each other, and we'd go out and shoot pool. He'd bring Michelle, his wife that he had from
Montreal.
Yeah. And he was just dating her. So he'd come around with me, him and Monique and Michelle would go out and shoot pool. And then, so me and him were fine. Me and him were great. And I'd always kept in good contact with Frank and Troy. Obviously Tommy Skio. That was during one of our up and down periods, and we've had many of those throughout the years. So, it was after that Pat Martin said, hey, what do you think about, playing the show? And I was like, a year before that, I'm like, not really. I'm doing Soul Motor, and I was starting to pick up some steam with the Soul Motor thing. But when he said it around this time, I was like, yeah, sure, why not? You know, if you can get the rest of the guys to do it, I'm in. But you know, make sure Skio's in it as well. You know, that was the one thing I said. I want to make sure it's all five of us. If we're gonna, because I thought we were just gonna do it for one night. I said, if we're gonna all do it for one night, it's got to be all of us. You know, so and you know, look, everyone wanted to do it, and you know, that period into the now, that whole period there was a great period for Tesla. You know, there have been ups and downs for us, and you know, after that it was a down period, and then we got Dave Rude, and it's been an up period. You know, pretty consistent since then, and now we're in a down period because of this fucking COVID bullshit. So, you know, you know, life's full ups and downs, and I think that's kind of an underlying thing in my book as well, is that, you know, you get what you get. You have to make the most out of it. So that's kind of what I'm saying. You know, and if it's anger or frustration some people take out of it, yeah, sure, I'm human. I get angry and frustrated all the time. And I also am happy too. You know, it kind of goes all over the place.
It does. Let me just ask you this: since you mentioned Tommy, in a sense, there was you know, a redemption for the band and for Jeff. You know, everybody had their drug issues, and you got through it. Is there a point where there can be redemption for Tommy, and you can, you know, be friends and maybe even play a show or do like Iron Maiden, have 3 guitars? I mean, is there redemption for Tommy in the band, or has that that boat sailed and you just like, you know what, we tried?
Look, I mean, I think as far as I'm concerned, from my point of view, that boat sailed. I'm not interested. You know, asking other guys in the band, would they be interested? Who knows what they'd say? That's up to them. But in order for that to happen, everyone has to be interested. And I'm just not. There's too much water under the bridge between me and him. And, you know, he took too many pot shots. And, you know, I don't wish him any ill will. I mean, as a matter of fact, the other day I heard one of his songs and I thought it was quite good. But I wouldn't want to play in a band with him again. No, not me personally.
No. And you know what? Sometimes it is, you know, it's best to have the memories. You know, when you break up with a girlfriend, sometimes it's good to have the memories.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, we did it twice or 3 or 4 times. I don't know how many times we did it. We did it enough. Well, you know, at a certain point, you quit sticking your hand in the fire, you know. But, you know, I wish him all the best. And I know he's capable of doing really good work. So
absolutely, and he gave me one of my greatest Tesla memories ever. I saw you in, I think it was called the New Bacchanal in San Diego or something like that, and you were a 4-piece because Tommy didn't show up. And to me, that was the greatest show ever because the band, you were like troopers. You just went, fuck it, we're just going to play, and it's going to be great. And it was a memorable night. To me, it was a memorable night. I was just like, man, I got to see Tesla as a 4-piece.
No. I mean, we had to rise above it. But I mean, honestly, I don't. You know, look, I want to go on record. I hold no ill will towards the man at all. You know what I mean? There were times me and him were super close. There were times we weren't. But I just, you know, I have no desire to put it back together. And I think it would be very disrespectful to Dave Rude, who's been there for the last 12 years. He's been there longer than Skio has.
Yeah, and he's been great.
I don't realize it. Dave Rude's been in the band longer than Skio was.
Yeah, and he's been absolutely phenomenal. I love Dave. And I see that we're almost at 4:30, and I know you have another interview. So as we say in Montreal, Brian, an absolute pleasure. Son of a Milkman, out in December or later this month. On the 15th, I believe it is now.
Yeah.
Merci, monsieur. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure talking to you, man. I always know you're going to
do the research.
Good job, and you always ask good questions, and I always look forward to speaking with you.
Thank you, Brian. And hopefully the next time we speak, it's on the road. It's time that we get back on the fucking road and see some shows.
Yeah, let's get back out there and start playing again. Fuck.
Yeah.
Drive me nuts.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure. Cheers.
Take care, man.
Cheers now. Bye-bye.
Bye.